Hey, you. You're finally awake.
If I've managed to get this out on time, then this character run should be going up the same day as Breath of the Wild Ultimate Edition, so truly, there is never a more fitting time to ask the question, can you beat Skyrim as Link? I've been asked about the possibility of doing this themed run for quite a while, which makes sense. With Link now being the protagonist of no less than 2 open world games, he should fit rather nicely into the land of Skyrim. Most of you suggested and were even kind enough to send me links for mods that added Zelda themed items, armour and weapons into the game. But guys, come on, we don't need to think that far outside of the box. This is because the Switch release of Skyrim, which I think is version number 4 for those of you wanting to keep track at home, actually has some equipment from Breath of the Wild in the base game. It can be collected by either rubbing a specific toy on your Switch, or climbing up to the throat of the world where you will find it in Mario's house. We are going for the latter option today because I'm not about to go out and buy an overpriced piece of plastic that will for all intents and purposes become a mediocre paperweight once this video ends. While the top of the mountain isn't supposed to be accessible until much later in the story, let's not kid ourselves, this is Skyrim. If there's a will, there's an exploit, and spoiler warning, it's shockingly easy to reach the summit within minutes of starting the game. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Like I mentioned, we're on the Switch version of Skyrim today, all for that authenticity, and because Nintendo may possibly murder me and everyone I hold dear if I so much as even think about using Zelda mods on a different console. The major drawback of this is twofold. Firstly, the game looks worse and runs at half the frame rate, so basically it's like the 360 and PS3 versions, so I guess it might feel nostalgic to some of you. Secondly, my Pro Controller broke a few weeks ago and I'm still waiting on a replacement, meaning I must suffer with the Joy-Cons. Fun fact, they actually started to drift for the first time about halfway into the playthrough, and I'm not even kidding. It was only the right one making me look down occasionally, but still, I cannot believe now, of all days, they finally decided to kick the bucket. Oh, and this isn't part of the rules, but I also turned on motion controls for the run. I didn't use them all the time, but it did remind me of happier days playing Twilight Princess, the best Zelda. Anyway, making Elf Boy is pretty straightforward. A wood elf with non-bloodshot eyes and blonde hair is about as good as we can get. Could we do better? Possibly, but even if I spend the majority of this run in third person, you will rarely ever see his face, given that the camera is almost always behind me. The intro is as intro as ever. The only major difference today is that I side with Hadvar on purpose, as that way I can have access to the key, allowing me to ignore the first group of Stormcloaks and sprint through the entire tutorial. I considered picking up the bow here, but I wanted my very first weapon to be the Master Sword, and I was sticking to my guns. Making it outside of Helgen, first things first, I take the Warrior Stone so my one-handed and block skills will increase faster, and then continue on the normal path to Whiterun. Like I said in the intro, our first stop is the throat of the world, but the best way to get there is by abusing the power of Skyrim's sticky horse hooves. I take a moment to ponder the sudden Skyrim 64 texture pack before approaching our new friend. I don't have the goal to legally obtain the horse, but let's be real, Link is always running into people's homes and stealing their valuables, so honestly, kidnapping this horse is rather on point for the character. From here, our path is rather straightforward, or rather straight up. I probably don't need to tell you that literally just running into and zigzagging back and forth will allow you to scale just about any structure in Skyrim. Therefore, the mountain isn't really the obstacle, rather it's the cold wind on the upper path that will more than likely be an issue if you don't know where you're going. Thing is, I do, so that's all good. For reference, I make sure to reach the Greybeard's courtyard, and then from there I can go up through these rocks and then scale up the rest of the mountain. At points it may seem like the horse wants to just abide by the laws of physics, but don't worry, just keep sprinting and jumping and eventually you will see the marker for the throat of the world. Once I saw that, I just went straight for it, and before long, I was coming up behind the Dragon Shout wall and had arrived at my destination. Before even picking up the run-specific gear, I went and retrieved the notched pickaxe. I probably will never use it for mining, but still. Anyway, what I'm really here for is in this very out-of-place looking chest, as inside is the Master Sword, Champion's Tunic, and the Hylian Shield. Alright, So, the Master Sword is basically just a reskinned Elven Sword, it does similar damage, and it is even upgraded with refined Moonstone. The shield seems decent, as it's light armor and provides 23 armor protection. The tunic, though, is mildly concerning. Rather than being individual pieces, it is instead a set that provides a flat 47 to your armor rating. The downside of this means that it will only count as me wearing a single piece of light armor, so not only will the skill not increase as fast, but I won't be able to see the benefits of any of the perks that require you to be wearing a fully matching set. All of this equipment is also not leveled, so picking it up at a higher level won't change anything. Not to worry, for now the armor will be decent for the early game, and the sword and shield should prove better than what you would normally have access to right away. I decided from here that I would actually play a decent chunk of the run in third person, just as it felt fitting for the character. My first objective was of course getting the Dragonstone from Bleak Falls Barrow to kick off the main quest, and the sword gets to work cutting down all of the bandits, spiders, and Draugr. Oddly enough, the sword does not get stained with blood after attacking people. It still draws blood, it's not completely censored or anything, but for whatever reason, the blade itself remains completely clean. I had an absolutely miserable time blocking arrows with the shield today, both in first and third person. I know enemies can fire past your shield if they're accurate enough and hit you, but it felt like throughout the entire playthrough, not once did the shield manage to block a single arrow. Not sure if it's a glitch or just really bad luck on my part. I attempted some gyro aiming with the bow, a grand total of once, I might add. My setup doesn't exactly allow for a clear line of sight between me and my switch, so therefore there was some mild interference, not allowing it to be as smooth as it could be. I leveled up in here as well, and just like Breath of the Wild, I'm only going to be taking stamina and health upgrades. Granted, there would be absolutely no reason to take a Magicka boost as I'm not using any spells today, but still, I just thought I would make note of that comparison. On the topic of leveling up, almost all of my perks when available will be getting dumped into the one-handed skill tree with a very rare perk point into block. If my armor is going to be lacking, then I must make up for it in damage. The one-handed perks and fast leveling thanks to the Warrior Stone help out a ton, by the way. Barely halfway through the dungeon and I've leveled up once more, and now the Master Sword was dishing out 17 damage per hit. That's pretty good for a one-handed weapon this early on, so as expected, the final Draugr at the end doesn't stand a chance against Link's onslaught. It's back to Whiterun now, and I almost forgot that I am public enemy number 1 with a whopping 50 gold fine due to my horse theft from before. Well, I managed to scavenge enough coins from all the bandit murder so I can just pay off the fine and be on my way. Funny enough, this is like a mini basic speedrun skip, as once you pay the fine, you're dropped just outside of Dragon's Reach, so I don't need to run through the town or even talk with the guard by the gate to let me in. I speak with the Jarl, and while him and his lackeys are worrying about the impending dragon attack, I am messing around with the enchantment table. Turns out you can enchant the Zelda gear. Makes sense, as none of them have any special enchantments, which, if you ask me, is a huge missed opportunity. Like, the Master Sword could have easily just had the same enchantment as the Bloodscale Blade from the Dragonborn DLC, except just make it that it can only fire the lasers when you're at full health, so that way it is accurate to the source material. Nerd! Back on track, I just decided to go against any enchantments today. I thought about maybe getting a frost enchantment for the Master Sword so it would have a faint blue glow to it, but eventually I just decided against it, as I didn't want to make things too easy. Even though most things in Skyrim are resistant to frost, but whatever. Regardless, it wasn't necessary, so next up was the first dragon fight, and it went rather well. Sure, it may look like things were rather dire, what with my almost empty health bar, but well-timed shield bashes and the assistance of Irlith and the guards helped to keep me alive long enough to deal the killing blow. I probably could have made things easier on myself if I would just use the bow, but I was being oddly stubborn about that today, for no good reason. With all the bandits and Draugr I killed in Bleak Falls Barrow, as well as a random trip to Embershard Mine off-screen, I was more than able to make enough gold from selling their loot to pay for 6 one-handed lessons with Armin. I also agreed to get his sword back from Valtheim Keep for another one-handed and block skill lesson. Before doing that though, I pay the Greybeards a flying visit. Another upside of having made my way to the Throat of the World earlier is that now I can just fast travel to the Greybeards as opposed to hiking my way up the 7,000 steps and having to contend with Skyrim's toughest enemy. Once they send me on my way, I head to Valtheim and easily dispatch the bandits. I figured their chief may be more difficult, but again, I am still at the point where elven weapons shouldn't be the norm, so I stand above them in terms of dishing out the pain. I just need to be careful when it comes to taking damage. For now, my best way to survive is to just put as many levels as possible into health instead of stamina. After I return the sword to Armin, I am now at the point where the merchants around town will start selling me refined moonstone. Let's not spend too long on this. I got enough to upgrade all 3 pieces of my gear, and the upgrades weren't all that great. The sword went up by 2, and the armor and shield by 4. It makes sense, mind you. If they are tied to the elven smithing tree, I won't be able to get the best out of them until I take the relevant perk and upgrade my blacksmithing skill. While that is something I could do, here's the thing. I have grinded out the blacksmithing skill so many times in casual playthroughs that I really do not want to do it today. Basically, what I'm saying is I am choosing to make this slightly more difficult than it needs to be because I don't want to spend the next hour and a half crafting jewellery. That means Ustengrav awaits, and once again, I procure a horse to take me there. For maybe the first time in a video, I engage in some horse combat to varying degrees of success. Against the bandits at the Silent Moon's camp, it works like a treat. Against the frost troll at Labyrinthian, not so great. In fact, the troll killed the horse, which led to me being forced to fight it on foot. Which, honestly, worked out so much better, and I was even able to best it. Sure, the reach may not be as long as a two-handed weapon, allowing me to stay out of the troll's range, but being able to quickly swing and then back away works just as well, if not a little better. I also fought an optional dragon, not sure why, as I don't plan on using its soul or anything, but yeah, that happened. It went about as easy as the first once I was able to get to land, so no problems here. Making it inside Ustengrav, and I have to contend with Draugr and a handful of necromancers. Robes will never protect them from being impaled, so why even bother? The Draugr are about the same as they were back in Bleak Falls, the only major difference being this time most of them are like me and haven't had their 68 hours, and as a result, they can shoot ice from their hands. The frost slows me down and drains stamina, which is never good as it means I can't shield bash or break through their guard with my own power attacks. Not to worry though, I have a way to circumvent this later with the assistance of an old friend. In terms of healing myself, well, honestly, I just clear out the room and then wait. Potions could come in handy though for later in the story, primarily the first Alduin fight. The skeletons in the lower level are a joke, as well as the baby spiders that you fight further in. The slightly larger, but not big enough to be classified as giant spider shows up, and he takes a moment to wonder us with his splendour as he majestically floats above. All that godly power ain't enough to stop a sword through the brain though. We make it to the horn and dun dun dun, it's nowhere to be found as it's been stolen by the absolute worst. Well, fortunately, all we must do to gain her trust is kill the next plot dragon, which, if you ask me, is hardly a display of strength considering he spends the first half of the fight just trying his best to grow his skin back, all the while the crazy mute elfman child is doing his best to descale him. With another soul under my belt, it's now time for a good old-fashioned infiltration mission. Unfortunately for all those present at the Thalmor embassy, Link does not take after Snake when it comes to stealth, but instead Raiden. You could really say I performed a Zandatsu on the guards as I cut their lives short and took all of their valuables. The only reason I am not being barbecued by their magic right now is that just like Breath of the Wild, I went out and made sure to collect some ingredients so that I could cook myself a very powerful meal to help me survive. The only major difference being there is only one dish in Skyrim worth wasting your resources on, so it's not as interesting. Good old vegetable soup always comes back to save me when I need it the most. Case in point, it allows me to confidently fight the frost troll at the end without the fear of my innards becoming outwards. It's back to Delphine yet again, and as she has a very one-track mind, she sends me off to murder more Thalmor. I mean, you don't have to ask me twice. The soup and stab combo continues to work wonders down here. It also helps that the narrow corridors allow me to take them on mostly one at a time. Meeting up with Esbern, we have a nice chat, which some of you may say is very out of character for Link. My counterpoint to that would be,
gee, it sure is boring around here.
Just a little bit more justified elf murder and we're back in Riverwood for all of 2 minutes before it's time to set off for Alduin's Wall. To rectify 2 of my past blunders, I went back to Whiterun and purchased the horse for 1,000 gold. Sure, it would be faster to fast travel to Markarth than head east, but using the horse felt fitting. Plus, if I do things this way, I can actually run into Alduin in the wild, just outside of Rorikstead, for yet another optional half-resurrecting dragon fight. Alduin, seeing how I abused this last time, actually knocks me down at the start of the fight, seemingly giving his buddy time to regain his composure after his centuries-long dirt nap. Yeah, well, unfortunately, that won't stop this silent killer, because as soon as I'm back on my feet, it's the old soup and strafe as I slash away at his fleshy face, and then bash him with the shield anytime he even so much as thinks about fighting back. The battle ends with the worst kill camera shot possible, as we get a lovely view of the dragon's butt while I deliver the killing blow. Not 2 minutes later, a blood dragon appears, and honestly, if I was in better shape, I could have probably fought him to the death, but in my current state, I am a goner. Well, luckily, I am right next to where I need to be, so I just lure him over to the small army of nearby Forsworn and let them have their way with him. While this is happening, I slip inside the nearby cave to practice writing on my hand. Thankfully for us, Delphine doesn't break today, as without the ability to download the unofficial patch, I honestly have no idea how I would fix this. After taking a moment to read the room, literally, Esbern informs us that we need a shout to take down Alduin, and the only people that would know such a thing is of course the Greybeards, or more specifically, the dragon on the peak. Well, we can already fast travel there whenever, but we know he is just going to send me after the Elder Scroll, so I go and see about finding it first. Normally I do this a lot earlier in the run, but I guess my routine was knocked off a bit from having already been to the Throat of the World more times than normal. This time I don't have to turn Ethereal Shout, by choice I might add, so I have to fight my way down through all the Thalmor and robots. The Dwarven robots are certainly no guardians, I'll tell you that much. A few power attacks and well-timed shield bashes is more than enough to see me past them. The Thalmor on the other hand can get out of said hand should more than one of them come after me at once. By now the armour is outclassed and then some by my opponents, so a full frontal assault without letting up is my best way to proceed with just about every single encounter. If I can't take a hit, then I have to make sure that the enemy can't land one. The Thalmor come close to killing me a few times, but I either just manage to take them out in time, or use a banked level up as a quick full heal. The only time I died down here was actually when I wildly misjudged a jump. When I reach Blackreach however, yeah no, I'm not fighting everything down here, so I buckle up my shoes and run for the scroll. The puzzle takes no time at all, and before you know it, I'm having a silent debate with the dragon and watching the first of two very overly long unskippable cutscenes. This of course leads to the hardest fight in the main story, but do not worry, I came as prepared as possible. We already know about the soup, which Alduin kindly gave me enough time to guzzle a few of them down before the fight began. This gives me a small, albeit important constant stamina and health regen effect, specifically 1 point every second to both stats for each bowl eaten. I also made sure to have some frost and fire resistance potions so that I could tank just a little bit of extra damage, as well as a potion that temporarily increased the damage I dealt with one-handed weapons. That last one wasn't planned, I literally just so happened to find it inside a random container during the run. I even bought just a few health potions as a backup, but honestly, they weren't needed. While this can be the most difficult encounter in the main quest if you're not prepared, I am in fact prepared, and as such, it's not at all taxing. Alduin really likes to try and set up his shout where he summons meteors from the sky. Thing is, that requires a longer than normal wind up, and during that entire process, he is vulnerable to being staggered by either a power attack, shield bash, or even dragon rend if you need to keep him on the ground for the time. Combine that with the soup, which makes it so my stamina is never fully depleted, this means I can essentially shield bash indefinitely, kinda like the run that started all this nonsense in the first place. It's like I've went full circle. Repeating this process for a few minutes is all that it takes to beat Alduin. He gets the last laugh in the end, not for running away, but because my stick started to drift as soon as the fight was over. All that leaves is the... peace council. Yeah, we're just gonna skip that. Trapping Odahviing with the power of slowly walking backwards works like a charm, and before you know it, I am back in my element, slaughtering hordes of Draugr, who may have gotten the best of me on my first attempt, but that's neither here nor there. Into Sovngarde, and we are met with a major test of strength in the form of Sun, and it goes about as well as you might think. In my defense, those headbutts are whiffing, but I guess Link just has a much bigger hitbox than I thought. Second try, and he just keeps running away from me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am grateful that he doesn't just outright kill me, but you don't have to prolong the fight like this just for your own sick amusement. Whenever I close the gap, we fight in very close quarters for a moment, and I very nearly got my head cleaved off by his axe more than once. Thankfully, the shield bash saves the day once more, and I am permitted access to the Hall of Valor. Not sure what to really say at this part. The four of us convince Alduin to land with a combined power of our outside voices, and then from there we kinda just gang up on him and shank him to death. He really does not stand a chance. Makes you wish he had like a second phase or even a slightly bigger health bar or just anything. Anywho, before long, Alduin is defeated, Sky Hyrule Rim is saved, finishing the game, and proving yes, you can indeed beat Skyrim as Link. I never for a minute thought this would be difficult. I did think the sword would be better, and the armor, but that's besides the point. I've just been in a bit of a Zelda mood lately, what with Tears of the Kingdom launching today, and I figured I could get around to this fun little run to celebrate with something a little easier. Regardless, that's going to be in this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. Try to one of these videos every week. My name is Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.